So, dear and respected friends, kindly mute yourself so that we can avoid disruptions. Yes, thank you so much. A very warm greetings to all of you and belated Gandhi Jayanti to all of you. Let us begin today's Swadhyay Sahachakra talk with an invocation of a song on Holocaust. So let me share the screen. Thank you so much for your kind attention. So thank you so much. I, Randhir Kumar Gautam, on behalf of Swadhyay Sahachakra family, Circle for Creative Co-Learning, Viswanathan Center for Asian Blossoming, Puducherry and Chennai, in collaboration with Rage Global Foundation USA, I, Randhir Kumar Gautam, I welcome you on all these very institutions to the very special talk on the very topic, Gandhi and Anti-Semitism. Dear and respected friend, please mute yourself so that we can avoid disruptions. It's a movement of extreme pleasure to welcome the guests who are virtually present here. Professor Dr. Christian Bartol, Director, Gandhi Information Center, Berlin, Germany. Discussant of today's talk, Professor Daniel Raveh from Tel Aviv University, Israel. Moderator of today's session, Professor Kumar Giri from Madras Institute of Development Studies, and all the respected participant, viewers, listeners. Let me give a brief introduction of honorable speaker of today's talk, Dr. Christian Bartol. He needs no introduction at all. He is a very distinguished Gandhian speaker, Gandhian thinker. He is an educational and political scientist, closely collaborating with the Free University Berlin since November 1993. He is also president of Gandhi Information Center, Research and Education of Nonviolence, a society of education of benefit to public based in Germany. And he is also a curator of more than 20 exhibitions on nonviolent resistance on Berlin Anti-War Museum, on Gandhi, Tolstoy, Rousseau, Ruskin, Thoreau, Huxley. He is extensively researched on Mahatma Gandhi's ideas, and he is very working hard for disseminated Gandhian thought to the whole society. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation. Let me give a brief introduction to our Swadhyay Sahachakra circle. Swadhyay Sahachakra Center for Co-Learning Circle of Self and Mutual Studies. It is an initiative of a studying and learning together self, culture, societies, and the world. Friends associated with this are eager to walk and mediate with new horizons of thinking, new movements of social and cultural change at work in our contemporary world. We study seekers such as Sri Aurobindo, Mahatma Gandhi, Chittaranjan Das, a creative soul, creative thinker from Odisha, and many others from around the world. We also present our own writings and reflect our own creativity together. We also invite seekers from different fields of life to share us with their lives, sadhana, visions, and a struggle for creating a world of beauty, dignity, and dialogue. We meet every Sunday and sometimes on Wednesday. Today is very special talk on the very topic, Gandhi and anti-Semitism. We live in a world where anti-Semitism is stronger than any time since the Holocaust. The concept itself is a source to better understand the social origins and politics of racism, casteism, and hate speech in the modern world. And understanding Gandhian praxeology in that sense definitely leads us to for the better solution of the anxious world caused by the sentiments or ideology of anti-Semitism. With this brief introduction, now I would like to invite Professor Kumar Giri to kindly moderate the session. Sir, over to you.
Thank you so much, Randhir, and thank you and a warm welcome to Christian and also to Dan, Salom, and we had a little bit of waiting for Dan to join us, and we are so happy that we are connected now. And this theme today, Gandhi and anti-Semitism, following birthday of Gandhi yesterday, is very significant. And anti-Semitism has been an important challenge of modernity of 19th and 20th century, and we saw the destruction of life and people and cultures. And it is still a continuing challenge. And anti-Semitism in its current form, as well as in both ways, because when there are difficult questions, for example, in the current juncture, when the state of Israel, the way it is treating Palestinians, for example, and when there is genuine concern, and then it is very easy to label them as continuation of anti-Semitism. But at the same time, there are also people who are continuing that politics of hatred. Now, to think of Gandhi here is, and Christian is going to tell more us about it. Now, Gandhi wrote to Abraham Soher, the head of the Bombay Javanist Association, on September 1, 1939, the day World War II began when Hitler invaded Poland. How I wish the new year may mean an era of peace for your afflicted people. And so Gandhi was always deeply concerned with the suffering of Jewish brothers and sisters. And there are more aspects to it. Gandhi's friend Herman Kallenbach, he came to visit Gandhi, and Gandhi didn't support the building of the state of Israel, which would displace the Palestinians. So with this brief offering, so it is a joy for me to listen to, and us to listen to Christian first, and then to Daniel, his reflections on this issue. So Christian, please.
I thank you so much that you followed my suggestion after speaking about Gandhi and Hitler and Gandhi and fascism, now to continue our sequel with a talk on Gandhi and anti-Semitism. Actually, I would right from the beginning suggest to you to continue this sequel with another session on Gandhi and nationalism, because this might be a topic which I cannot cover today in such an extent I wished to. And also another one then on Gandhi and racism. So this would be a good follow-up for this particular session. And I'm very grateful for Randhir to play this very moving song by Joan Baez, which is called For Sasha, because someone who listens to this song feels compassion and empathy with the victims of the Holocaust, which actually is a misleading name because it refers to the Greek burnt offering, and you can call it Shoah, destruction. I think this might be a more familiar term nowadays, which is describing the genocidal activities, crimes, mass murders of the German Nazi dictatorship. And Hitler was one representative, the leading representative of this dictatorship. But we should keep an eye on all the collaborators in Germany and also outside Germany who supported the Hitler Nazi dictatorship. And also long before their seize of power, by the way, starting with the destruction of the revolution in Munich, April 1919, when Hitler's activities started. Afterwards, he was trained as a propaganda activist, and he might have been a spy even. So it's very interesting to see this early history before the foundation of the NS party. But today, I think I should first explain why I think it's important to think about not just Gandhi and Zion, Gandhi and the Palestine issue, Gandhi and Zionism, or Gandhi and the Jews, but particularly about Gandhi and the hatred against Jews, which is a more approachable term for this long history of hatred against Jews, which then became fabricated in the 19th century as anti-Semitism, fabricated in the German language area, and grew from Christian anti-Judaism to racist anti-Semitism, culminating in the Shoah. And we all can be glad that the Shoah did not succeed completely. And now this lecture and also our thoughts should be in a contribution that the intentions of those who perpetrated and killed, murdered Jewish people will never succeed in history. So this is from the start. And then I would like to remind you that the date chosen today is actually not by intention from my side, but this date is particularly appropriate because not because it is the national holiday of Germany, 3rd of October, but because it is the birthday of the political journalist Karl von Ossietzky, whose daughter was my guest in 1985, and who, as a prisoner of Hitler, received the Nobel Peace Prize for his commitment for peace in the year 1936 for 1935, after a 3-year-long international campaign supported by Albert Einstein and writer Thomas Mann. Mostly Heinrich Mann should be highlighted. Heinrich Mann's contribution to this campaign was of greatest significance, and actually brought a reaction which the editors of the collected works described this way. Karl von Ossietzky, 1889 to 1938, German pacifist and writer. He was arrested as an enemy of the state and imprisoned. While in jail, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace. Hitler was so enraged that he prohibited Germans thenceforth from accepting such awards. And I would like to continue, and the British were warned not to accept the success of the nomination of Gandhi in 1938 and afterwards until 1948. But we shall not complain that Tolstoy and Gandhi did not receive the Nobel Peace Prize, but just think about the reasons why this force of nonviolent resistance has been suppressed. And even in the eyes of the Nobel Peace Center, this award for Karl von Ossietzky became the most dangerous prize, as they called their exhibition recently, on Karl von Ossietzky. And Karl von Ossietzky is somehow related to Gandhi because Gandhi gave a statement on the nonviolent resistance of the priest Martin Niemöller and the journalist Karl von Ossietzky in one of his articles. So now let me start with Karl von Ossietzky wrote about Gandhi, 1929. Gandhi is no political human being in the European sense. He is more. He is the secret force without office and party, yet dominating everyone. He is a defender of the old and a guide to the unknown. At the same time, teacher of wisdom and an elementary school headmaster, thinker and practitioner, dreamer and organizer of American format. But in everything exemplary, whether he stood up for sanitary reforms, or whether he fought the ancient prejudice against the pariahs, or whether he silently entered the British prison. India can be considered fortunate enough that her new law is not imposed on her by a dictator, does not boast in the relentless command of an Asian Napoleon, but is proclaimed by the gentle voice of Mahatma Gandhi. It was before fascism succeeded in 1933 in Germany, 4 years before, and few weeks after, few weeks also before the Wall Street crash and the Great Depression, which facilitated Hitler's seize to power in 1933. So actually, there are three approaches to speak about Gandhi and anti-Semitism. One approach is to follow his earlier quotes. And why? I give you the motivation. Those who interpret Gandhi's statements in 1938, after the pogrom in Germany against Jews, in November 38, in an article called The Jews, those who try to understand this article and the follow-up statements of Gandhi in his journal, but in other magazines too, they should read the earlier references of Gandhi first, just to find out what is actually the pattern behind all these statements of Gandhi. So if I can contribute to enlighten the background of Gandhi's statements from 1938 onwards today, then this might be a precious contribution for further reception of Gandhi's writings. The second approach would be to highlight Gandhi's collaboration with Jewish contemporaries who contributed immensely to the success of the Satyagraha campaign in South Africa, particularly Herman Kallenbach, but also Louis Rich, Henry Solomon Leon Pollack, and Sonja Schlesin. And we should consider the fact that some of these in their family had experiences with anti-Semitism in Russia, in the Tsarist Russia. That's why the family of Kallenbach went to the German territory. Even the name of the family went from Kalmanovich to Kallenbach. And so I suppose it is not of minor importance to express the fact that one basic motivation for the Jewish friends and collaborators of Gandhi was influenced by the experience of anti-Semitism in their families and the sense of justice, real justice, and the wish to achieve equal rights and to be respected and tolerated. This is another form of toleration, of course. It is also the absence of any more discrimination, social, political, cultural, religious. Now, before I start with one of these two approaches, highlighting the contribution of Jewish friends and collaborators, and referring to earlier statements of Gandhi, which are most important to understand his relation and his attitude against anti-Semitism, I would like to inform you that I spent some years of my life, to say at least, with a doctorate work. And I give you now the link, because it is related to education against anti-Semitism. This is the English title, Sacrifice and Scapegoat, Reflections on the Ethics of Nonviolence. And I give you the link. It's in German language. It has not been translated so far. And for scientists, it might be interesting that it relates, among others, to the theory of Hubert and Mauss, Henri Hubert and Marcel Mauss, about sacrifice. Those were contemporaries of the French sociologist Émile Durkheim. And I'm very happy that the Free University of Berlin published this work this year on, by the way, 13th of April, which was the appropriate date because it's the date when Hitler committed suicide. It was published, and on the 8th of May this year, the day of liberation, for me it was, I received the doctorate certificate as a doctor of philosophy for this work. So now after this prologue, I would like to refer to Gandhi's earlier statements, completely aware that you might not know three works which might be fundamental to understand Gandhi's collaboration and friendship with Jewish contemporaries. I will show you these works, so just to explain to you why it might be appropriate to quote them afterwards. One is the pioneering work in this aspect by Professor Margaret Chatterjee, Gandhi and His Jewish Friends. This book is of great significance because of Professor Margaret Chatterjee's long time in India. It was published in 1992, and I was invited by her, together with the grandniece of Hermann Kallenbach, to a tea house in Oxford, and I appreciate our meeting. And she was so right when she said it's so much to be done in research. And her contribution is invaluable because this book is a good basis. I will explain you later why. Then I would like to refer to the book, which you also find as an electronic file on the internet, Hermann Kallenbach, Mahatma Gandhi's friend in South Africa. This is the biography I was glad to write together with Dr. Sari between 1989 and 1997. It was the first biography with a very significant letter of Hermann Kallenbach to his sister, Jeanette Sammel, and reference quotes, which are important to understand how Hermann Kallenbach prevented a massacre from taking place and guaranteed the success of the Epic March in 1913, which gives us the great joy to speak about Gandhi nowadays as someone who exposed nonviolence successfully. Otherwise, he would have been one of the victims of genocidal massacres, as they were popular in South Africa because of the colonialist powers policy, the Germans in Southwest Africa against Herero and Namakwa, and the Bambata rebellion, the Maji Maji rebellion in East Africa. So you have a lot of even more crimes of colonialist powers, French, German, and also British. Not to forget the Boer Wars, when Gandhi was a stretcher bearer, and the Bambata rebellion was a crucial experience for Gandhi as a stretcher bearer because he felt compassion and empathy with the Zulu victims, and afterwards started his campaigns. And also he changed some of his attitudes, but this would be another lecture, as I told you, referring Gandhi and racism. And the third book is this one. It's called We Do Not Want the Violence, the Buba Gandhi Controversy, and contains English language documents. And this was published in the year 1998. Actually, I collected all the documents I found in Israel and also in Germany during my stay in Haifa and my visit in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, when I really had a crucial experience at Yad Vashem, the commemoration site for the victims of the Holocaust, and spoke with scientists there, and found a very enlightening article about the background of Martin Buber's statement against Gandhi, written by Dina Porat. And so I tried to compose these statements in this book, in English original and in German, sometimes authorized, sometimes new translation into English and to German. And so actually there was also a very interesting coincidence that a very interesting letter was written to Gandhi by Mr. Simon Wolf, whose widow gave us authorization to print this letter first time. And Simon Wolf wrote to Gandhi from Jerusalem, and Gandhi appreciated this letter. So now I would like to start with the early remarks of Gandhi so that you know about the background. This might be interesting because we want to understand. And most remarkable is the interview which Gandhi gave in 1931 on his birthday in the Jewish Chronicle in London. In this interview, you find in the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, volume 48. So Gandhi says, I have a world of friends among the Jews. In South Africa, I was surrounded by Jews, and I have had a Jewish shorthand writer and typist who was regarded more as a member of the family. I cannot, however, say that I have made a proper study of the Jewish religion, but I have studied as much as a layman can. I think the Jewish religion is a very fine religion, being so closely allied to Christianity in many respects. For example, the prophets of the Old Testament are all Jews, and Jesus himself was a Jew. I visited the synagogue at Johannesburg during the festival of the Passover, and you can almost say I was keeping the Passover with my Jewish friends, because I went to their house every night, and I heartily enjoyed, what do you call them now? Ah, yes, matzos. I think matzos are very nice and crisp. I have, however, attended 2 or 3 Jewish services, which I think are very impressive. But my own feeling is that, quote, the heart was lacking, quote. That is to say, the spirit was lacking. They were too ceremonial, although I must say the ceremony was very nice. The Jewish rabbi was a celebrated scholar, and he delivered a learned discourse, but it did not touch my heart. My attitude towards Jews is one of great sympathy. I am very much attracted to the Jews, firstly, because of selfish motives, since I have very many Jewish friends. Secondly, for a far deeper one, they have got a wonderful spirit of cohesion. That is to say, wherever you find Jews, there is a spirit of comradeship among them. Moreover, they are people with a vision. The implication and full meaning of that vision, if I may put it without impertinence, they do not themselves realize. I'm sometimes asked whether I regard Jews as the chosen people. And I say, well, in a sense, yes. But then all peoples consider themselves to be chosen. Zionism, in its spiritual sense, is a lofty aspiration. By spiritual sense, I mean they should want to realize the Jerusalem that is within. Zionism, meaning reoccupation of Palestine, has no attraction for me. I can understand the longing of a Jew to return to Palestine. And he can do so if he can without the help of bayonets, whether his own or those of Britain. In that event, he would go to Palestine peacefully and in perfect friendliness with the Arabs. The real Zionism, of which I have given you my meaning, is the thing to strive for, long for, and die for. Zion lies in one's heart. It is the abode of God. The real Jerusalem is the spiritual Jerusalem. Thus he can realize this Zionism in any part of the world. Then Gandhi added that he had not been to Palestine yet, unfortunately, in 1931, and that he hoped to go there someday. And Gandhi continued, I should love to go, for I have read so much about the Holy Land. Anti-Semitism is really a remnant of barbarism. I have never been able to understand this antipathy to the Jews. I have read Israel Sangwell's Children of the Ghetto, and when I read it, I realized what unmerited persecution Jews had already gone through. And I felt then, as I feel now, that this persecution is, if I can again say so in all humility, a reflection upon those who, in the name of Christianity, have persecuted this long-suffering race. The remedy? My remedy is twofold. One is that those who profess to be Christians should learn the virtue of toleration and charity. And the second is for Jews to rid themselves of the causes for such reproach as may be justly laid at their door. I want to repeat the second half of the last sentence. And the second is for Jews to rid themselves for the causes for such reproach as may be justly laid at their door. And you should, if you want to understand Gandhi and interpret his texts, always consider that he was very precise in his language. And when he said may be, he is really not certain if these reproaches were justified. And this you will find in other passages of his texts. So it is not a detail. So there's no chance for us to generalize that he is that he is repeating the prejudices or the stereotypes of anti-Semites. And anti-Semitism is here written with this hyphen, and the hyphen is really on debate because anti-Semitism as well as Semitism seems to be a fabrication. You can read about this in scholarly articles of encyclopedias, and the objection against this way of spelling and also the term itself are all, I would say, legitimate. But we should try to continue to deepen our understanding. So the next is interesting because it anticipates Gandhi's comparison with the situation of the Untouchables in India, with the situation of oppressed Jews in Europe and elsewhere. And this you find in a discussion with a Roman Catholic priest in March 5, 1937, printed in Harijan, 13 of March 1937, and you find it in the collected works in volume 64. And Gandhi writes, caste has no religious basis. but it is certainly regarded as bound up with religion, though it is not derived from the scriptures. Untouchability is the last word on caste. And as soon as untouchability goes, caste goes. The outcast has been all over the world. In Europe, the Jews were outcasts and confined to the ghettos where life was much worse than in the Untouchables quarters. The degradation to which the outcasts in India are reduced is bad enough. But what one knew of ghettos from Israel Zengwill's book works, what one knew of ghettos from Israel Zengwill's works, which years ago I read at the instance of a friend, was something blood-curdling. Such a thing cannot happen in India because of the non-violence of assault that we are practicing. However, though we have no ghettos, there is nothing to choose between them and untouchability. Take untouchability out and the fabric of caste is destroyed. So the next is coming back. His statement in 1939, and he refers to Martin Niemöller, also the anti-Nazi Protestant theologian who had been arrested by the Gestapo and imprisoned in a concentration camp then. And he responds to the question, is nonviolence ineffective? Now, this is a very comprehensive text. And let me say so, I am today a bit, exhausted. I would like to recommend you to read this text. It is really, really important to read this text as a whole. And it's really interesting. The title again is Nonviolence Ineffective? ? Written on the train to Bardoli, January 2nd, 1939, printed in Harijan, 7th of January, 1939, in the Collected Works of Mahatma Gandhi, volume 68. And here, in this crucial text, you find the challenge that Gandhi gave his statements before the catastrophe to challenge those who became victims of the catastrophe to organize nonviolent resistance. And he appealed to the leaders of this community to organize nonviolent resistance before it is too late. It was not the first time. And let me remind you that the first comprehensive statement of Gandhi was given in 1931, before Hitler's success in 1933. So, then you have, in the context of Gandhi's response to the statement of Chaim Greenberg in the Jewish Frontier in New York, a very remarkable last sentence. Nevertheless, I wish with all my heart that somehow or other the persecution of the Jews in Germany will end, and that the question in Palestine will be settled to the satisfaction of all the parties concerned. It was in 1939 in May. And in the footnote 4 of page 289, volume 69 of the Collected Works, where you find the reference to Chaim Greenberg's article, "We are treated as subhumans, we are asked to be superhuman," you see the reproach against Gandhi that he is he might be influenced by, or he allowed himself to be influenced by the anti-Zionist propaganda being conducted among fanatic pan-Islamists. So if you want to understand in a deeper sense, we shall keep this in mind. And this approach is still the pattern of similar criticisms and reproaches against Gandhi until today. So then, let us go to notes. This is written already in 1922, on 9th of February, volume 22, Collected Works. And this is interesting because it shows that Gandhi had not a simplistic attitude of the reproaches against Jews, which were propaganda tools for anti-Semites then and even nowadays. So I want to read this to you. It's really interesting. It's referring to Moses, Prophet Moses. You know, you remember the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, which are the ethical code, which should be binding as a religion in the Judeo-Christian world and in the Muslim world, the world of Islam. So I would like to read this quote from 1922, very early. Gandhi writes, "It has been my belief and practice for over 40 years deliberately to practice the doctrine of non-resistance to evil, not to retaliate. There are more instances than one in my public life when, with the ability to retaliate, I have refrained from doing so and advised friends to do likewise. My life is dedicated to the spread of that doctrine. It is non-retaliation. That is non-retaliation, or were my words. My life is dedicated to the spread of that doctrine. I read it in the teaching of all the greatest teachers of the world. Zoroaster, Mahavir, Daniel, Jesus, Mahomet, Nanak, and a host of others. Indeed, I am not sure that we do justice to Moses when we impute to him the doctrine of retaliation in the sense that he made it obligatory on his followers to exact tooth for a tooth. It may be my wish that is father to the thought, but I do think that in an age when people were unrestrained in their appetite for the enemy's blood, Moses restricted retaliation to equal measure and no more." So I interrupt this quote now. You see that Gandhi understood the meaning of the word tachat. Instead, eye instead of an eye, tooth instead of a tooth. And still this eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth is a slogan. And even in Gandhi quotes, you find this distortion. But if you read Gandhi, you see that he understood the principle of substitution, which is completely opposite to violent retaliation. Understand? You understand? What a distortion of the tradition and how unfair the reproach is. So I continue this quote. He says, "But I must not lead the reader into religious discussion. Whilst, however, non-violence is now, has ever been, and I pray to God it ever may be my final creed for all occasions, it is true that there are thousands in the ranks of non-cooperation with whom non-violence is an expedient or a policy to which they are not committed for all time and all circumstances. They believe that for India, as she is constituted, there is no method but that of non-violence for regaining her freedom. And this they believe not merely because she has no arms or training in them, but also because with her diverse creeds and races, there's nothing for her but constant internecine strife. If her children began the habit of invoking the god of war for every occasion, the best of us are beginning to see more in the doctrine of nonviolence than when we first approached it. You see, here Gandhi sees very clearly as early as 1922 that many apply nonviolence as a political technique because of technical and strategical political reasons, and not as a principle. Because they do not understand the principle of non-retaliation, which you find in the writings of Leo Tolstoy and Gandhi, and which are dating back to the old prophets from different religions. Now coming back to the fact that you will find this statement of Gandhi, the Jews, written in Harijan, 26th of November, 1938, and written in Segaon, November 20, 1938. And here you have again a very precise language. So if you read, just read slowly.
So Christian.
Because, yes, I wanted to stop now, my lecture, yes.
No,
so
no,
I just wanted
now.
to say, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not now, because in the meantime, some friends from Odisha,
Yeah.
they have joined, and
Yeah.
I request you,
Okay.
Randhir, and all friends that let me make a brief translation of what they have
Yes,
spoken
please.
in Odia,
Yes.
and then we would listen to you.
Okay.
I am grateful to all of you for your generosity, because these friends, they are very eager to know what you have spoken, a little bit of translation. So आमर भाई भौणी माने आज आमर बंधु क्रिश्चियन से कहउचंती गांधी एवं एंटीसेमिटिज्म होची जे सेमाइट्स सेमाइट्स होची the religion of the Semites, so Semitic people, विशेष करी जो यहूदी लोक से यहूदी मानक संपर्क रे किछि लोक किछि धारणा करिसंती एवं तांको केमती घृणा करिसंती से घृणाटा अनेक दिन रही आसीची तार मूल सूत्रटा एमती होउची जे यीशु ख्रीष्ट जते बेले जन्म होइतले से गोटे यहूदी परिवार रे जन्म होइतले किंतु से जो प्रकार आध्यात्मिक एवं सामाजिक उत्तोलनर पथटी से बाछितिले तापर तांको जो धरि दिया गला एवं तांको जो क्रूशबिद्ध करा गला सेथिरे किछि जो सत बेलकार जो यहूदी प्रिस्ट थिले किछि ता संगरे समाने संश्लिष्ट थिले सेति पई मूलरु ही जे ख्रीष्ट को जो क्रूशबिद्ध करा गला सेति पई समस्तक मनरे गुटे यहूदी मानकु यीशु ख्रीष्टंकर क्रूशबिद्ध पई दायी करा जाय था एटा होछि प्रारंभिक कथा तापर इतिहास रे अनेक कारण रु यहूदी लोक माने परे तांको निजर जो वासस्थान पैलेस्टाइन छाड़ी सारा पृथ्वी विभिन्न आड़क आसले आम भारत वर्ष को भी मध्य आछंती केरल रे कोचिन रे यहूदी मंदिर टी अछि भारी सुंदर संप्रदाय हजार हजार वर्ष धरि रहि आसला यूरोप रे जते बेले मध्य युग रे ख्रिश्चियनिटी आसला मध्य युग रे ख्रिश्चियनिटी ख्रिश्चियन लोक मान भितरे जे कथा थिला आमे केही आमे मनी लेंडर हबानी आमे केही गोटे अर्थ जहाँ पाखे अच्छी ताकू व्यवसाय कर यहूदी लोक मान पाखे पैसा थिला से दौले लोक भी गोटे एमती भूल धारणा था जे यूदी लोक माने पैसा दिया निया करके अनेक शोषण करछंती आ जतबे आधुनिक समाज आसिला आधुनिकता आसिला अनेक कारण जो अनेक यहूदी चिंताविद माने से माने भारी जुगान्तकारी थे विप्लवी थे जमी कार्ल मार्क्स सिगमंड फ्रॉयड अल्बर्ट आइंस्टाइन आ पूर्व स्पिनोजा यही सब भितर गोटे यहूदी मानक गोटे जो घृणाटा थिला धीरे धीरे से गोटे राजनैतिक रूप देला तेणु यही परिप्रेक्षी में गांधी आमर जो आरथर गांधी और हिटलर कथा पड़ता तो गांधी केमिति जो यहूदी मानक ऊपर जो घृणा थिला ताकू से केमिति ताकू बुझिकी ताकू रूपांतर करने केमिति विषय से कहते एवं ख्रिस्टियन मूलरू जो साउथ आफ्रिका रे गांधी काम करते अनेक यहूदी बंधु मान थे जमी हरमान कालेनबाक जे पुणी गांधी को देखा करने को आसते जिते सेवाग्राम आश्रम आसते तेणु मूलरू केमती गांधी यहूदी मान सहित भारी गभीर भाव में संश्लिष्ट थे यहूदी मान जो धर्म उपाचार जो सिरिमनी पासओवर बोली गोटे सिरिमनी से जोग देते पुणी मूल को गोटे भारी गभीर अनुभव रही जे अनेक समय कह मोसेस से यहूदी धर्मर प्रतिष्ठाता सी कुआड़े कही तुम गोटे जब तुम उपर आक्रमण कर तुम्हें तार प्रति आक्रमण कर गांधी कहते प्रकृत में केते दूर यही कथाटी आम मोसेस आक्षेप कर प्रक्षेपण करा मुझे जाने ना कहीं से समय लोक मान भितर गोटे छोट जिनसटे हो गले मनकर किए आपंकर आंगुलीटे काटिगला तार समग्र वंश को आप निपात करदे आई क्षेत्र में से मोसेस कहते ठीक अच्छे तुम जब गोटे आखिटे नहीं गला से आखिटा ही आण तार समग्र शरीर टाक खंड 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 कौन कर तेणु गांधी केते गभीर भाव में मोसेस को बुझीते से कहते मोसेस को कथा केवल गोटे गोटे भायोलेंट रिटालिएशन नुह जिते आम मनकर गोटे तुम बाड़ी किए गोटे आंब नहीं गला बोली तुम तार समग्र माने घर टाक तुम पोड़ीदब ना तेणु एमती भारी गभीर कथा क्रिश्चियन कहते खाली एतिकी सामान्य सूचना दूसरे आपण मैंने अधिक बुझा चेष्टा करेंगे यस क्रिश्चियन प्लीज
Yes, thank you, Ananta, for the translation. You know, I tell you that maybe this could be the chance for us to go back to Gandhi's collaboration with Jewish friends in South Africa, so that you understand.
If I may, I interrupted you. You are going to tell about the Gandhi's 1938 essay, "The Jews." You are telling a few lines more about it.
Yeah, that is right. And there's even something more, which is of importance now, because in the context of what I presented to you so far, it would be interesting and commendable to read the English language translation of Arnold Zweig's Thanks to Gandhi, written in Haifa, Palestine, February 1939, in the English translation, because I just found the German language text so far, and I'm desperately seeking the English language translation, which might fit in this context, because Arnold Zweig was a great German Jewish anti-war writer, personal friend of Professor Sigmund Freud, and who lived in Palestine, where he emigrated to, until he came back to Germany to become the president of the Academy of Arts of the Academy of Sciences of the East German state. Arnold Zweig, who was the most brilliant writer of 5 novels against the First World War, and also because of his anti-fascist novel, The Axe of Wandsbek, he gave a statement which could be of universal significance in the context of non-retaliation. And he understood Gandhi very well when he wrote, and when I was working on the Kallenbach biography in Haifa on the Mount Carmel, I visited, not only that I visited his houses, but also met contemporaries of his in an old people home where I gave a lecture on Hermann Kallenbach. So just to show you, and this is an attitude which is quite different from the attitude of particularly Avraham Shochet, who I met as a blind man on Mount Carmel in Haifa, and you referred to him, Ananta, in the beginning. But so thanks to Gandhi, in the English translation is what I desperately look for today. And in case we find this text, we should have a look at this, because I feel that it might be appropriate to refer to this now. Let me see if I find the British translation of this. Yeah, it is certainly possible to find this, because if you go to the internet archive.org and then look for Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan's birthday volume of this, you know, he published a birthday volume for Gandhi, and then, you know, he this birthday volume 1939 with contributions from different authors was republished, and after the Second World War, with contributions of Aldous Huxley and Arnold Zweig, you find them. So I would advise you to read Thanks to Gandhi by Arnold Zweig in the English translation. And if I'm able to find it now, I will tell you during this session. And if I'm not able, please try to find this precious statement. And it is, as I mentioned in my last reference to Gandhi's text in 1922, a statement against retaliation. And he refers this retaliation, which we summarize erroneously as eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, with the Code of Hammurabi. You understand, yeah? So this is actually the nucleus of revenge, and even blood revenge. And as we know, this dark cause and effect logic is behind all military strategies nowadays. All of them, all. And also behind the evil institution of death penalty. So if you refer to Gandhi's statements from an ethical point of view, you see that he understands the essence of the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. And maybe this could be a preliminary end to open the dialogue. In the course of the dialogue, I might refer to the quality of cooperation with Louis Rich, Henry Pollack, and Sonja Schlesien, and particularly Hermann Kallenbach, and how Gandhi appreciated the particular qualities, maybe in brackets I say he highlighted the love of Jewish people to the Yiddish language. It was a unifying tool for the nation, Yiddish language. In one of his statements, he praised the generosity. You could say, oh, Gandhi wanted to appear as a philo-Semite. It's just the other side of the coin of anti-Semitism, but it's not. It's not. On the contrary, because he was also, as you have heard or listened to, criticizing his contemporaries as human beings. But this bond of friendship between Hermann Kallenbach and Gandhi is a proof that Gandhi missed Kallenbach's presence when he was in Champaran. For selfish reasons, to quote him, yes, but not only. Not only. And not because of the qualities ascribed to German craftsmen or technicians. No. There was a very cordial friendship between Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi and Hermann Kallenbach in particular. And so I was very glad to see this. I give you just one example maybe for their relation and how it is also connected with Germany before the First World War. Gandhi learned the skill of sandal making from Hermann Kallenbach. And Kallenbach learned this skill of sandal making from Trappist monks in the monastery of Marian Hill in South Africa, German Trappist monks. And Gandhi applied the skill by preparing shoes for his political opponent, Jan Christian Smuts, in the prison. And when I read about this kind of greatness, this quality of greatness of Gandhi in a children's book, I, found interest to know more about this man. And maybe this is a reason enough to say that in this particular context, for example, Kallenbach facilitated and enabled Gandhi to create a present for his political opponent in his intention to melt even the stoniest heart. And you remember that there was a lifelong friendship in spite of all the differences of opinions with General Smuts, who became later president of South Africa and also a holistic scientist. So we should first of all not underestimate the serious crisis in South Africa and water down the conditions during the Satyagraha campaign and the dangers. And on the other hand, we should see that Gandhi, with his 13,000 fellow satyagrahi, were really struggling, a desperate campaign to emancipate from the indentured labor system, from the imposed head tax and discrimination and racism of the British Boer colonialists. Now, as a last reference, I would like to maybe read to you this particular instance when Kallenbach saved the life of the Satyagrahis. There was a serious situation when the marchers who crossed the borders between Natal and Transvaal, between Charleston and Foxrust, could have met European settlers who met in Foxrust to publicly threaten the Indians with violent shooting. It was Hermann Kallenbach who converted their minds. Mr. Kallenbach attended this meeting to reason with the Europeans, who were, however, not prepared to listen to him. Indeed, some of them even stood up to assault him. Mr. Kallenbach is an athlete, having received physical training at the hands of Sando Muslims, and it was not easy to frighten him. One European challenged him to a duel. Mr. Kallenbach replied, "As I have accepted the religion of peace, I may not accept the challenge. Let him who will come and do his worst with me, but I will continue to claim a hearing at this meeting. You have publicly invited all Europeans to attend, and I am here to inform you that not all Europeans are ready as you are to lay violent hands upon innocent men. There is one European who would like to inform you that the charges you level at the Indians are farce. The Indians do not want what you imagine them to do. The Indians are not out to challenge your position as rulers. They do not wish to fight with you or to fill the country. They only seek justice, pure and simple. They propose to enter the Transvaal, not with a view to settling there, but only as an effective demonstration against the unjust tax which is levied upon them. They are brave men. They will not injure you in person or in property. They will not fight with you, but enter the Transvaal they will, even in the face of your gunfire. They are not the men to beat a retreat from fear or your bullets or your spears. They propose to melt, and I know they will melt, your hearts by self-suffering. This is all I have to say. I have had my say, and I believe that I have thus rendered you a service. Beware and save yourselves from perpetrating a wrong." With these words, Mr. Kallenbach resumed his seat. The audience was rather abashed. The pugilist who had invited Mr. Kallenbach to single combat became his friend. So, maybe this is the time for our dialogue, Ananta and Randhir.
So touching and so
So
touching,
touching, so deep.
so touching Christian. So I'll just spend a few minutes in translating and we'll invite our dear friend Daniel. Now, ଆମର ଭାଇ ଭଉଣୀ ମାନେ ଏଇ ଶେଷ ପର୍ବରେ ଖ୍ରୀଷ୍ଟିଆନ ଯେଉଁ କଥାଟି କହିଲେ, ସେ କହୁଥିଲେ ଯେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ସାଉଥ ଆଫ୍ରିକାରେ ଗାନ୍ଧୀ ସତ୍ୟାଗ୍ରହ କଲେ, ନାଟାଲରୁ ଟ୍ରାନ୍ସଭାଲକୁ ଆସିଲେ, ଏଇ କଥା ସେ ତାଙ୍କର ଆତ୍ମଜୀବନରେ ବି କିଛି ମାନେ ଲେଖିଛନ୍ତି। ହର୍ମାନ କାଲେନବର୍ଗ ଯେତେବେଳେ ସେ ନାଟାଲରୁ ଟ୍ରାନ୍ସଭାଲ ଆସୁଥିଲେ, ଆଉ ସେତେବେଳେ ହ୍ୱାଇଟ୍ ଲୋକମାନେ ସବୁ ପ୍ରସ୍ତୁତ ହେଇକି ଆସିଥିଲେ ତାଙ୍କୁ ଆକ୍ରମଣ କରିବାକୁ। ହର୍ମାନ କାଲେନବର୍ଗ ଗାନ୍ଧୀଙ୍କର ବନ୍ଧୁ, ୟୁହୁଦୀ ବନ୍ଧୁ ଆସି କହିଲେ, ୟୁରୋପିଆନ ମାନଙ୍କୁ କହିଲେ, ଦେଖ ତମେ ସବୁ ଏକଜୁଟ ହେଇଛ, କଣ ପାଇଁ ଏକଜୁଟ ହେଇଛ? ତମେ ଏକଜୁଟ ହେଇଛ କଣ ଏଇ ନିରସ୍ତ୍ର ନିରୀହ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କୁ ମାରିବା ପାଇଁ? ତୁମେ ମାରିପାର, କିନ୍ତୁ ତୁମେ ଯାହା ବି କଲେ ବି ସେ ତାଙ୍କର ଯାତ୍ରାରେ ସେମାନେ ପାଖକୁ ଆସିବେନି। ଏବଂ ଏଇ କଥା ଖ୍ରୀଷ୍ଟିଆନ ଭାରି ହୃଦୟର ସହିତ କହିଲେ ଯେ କାଲେନବର୍ଗ କେତେ ଶ୍ରଦ୍ଧାର ସହିତ, କେତେ ସାହସର ସହିତ, ଆଉ ଯେଉଁ ଯୁବକ ଜଣକ କାଲେନବର୍ଗକୁ ଚ୍ୟାଲେଞ୍ଜ କରିଥିଲା ଯେ ଆସ ମୁଁ ତମ ସାଙ୍ଗରେ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ କରିବି, ସେ ତାଙ୍କର ଏକ ବନ୍ଦୀ ହେଇଗଲା। So thank you, Christian, with our heart. And now, dear Daniel, we look forward to your thoughts and reflections.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. So thank you, Ananta, for inviting me. I'm sure that many of you, like me, were invited to different events on the occasion of Gandhi Jayanti. However, none of these events was on Gandhi and anti-Semitism, but on more conventional dimensions of Gandhi and Gandhi's writings. Because of the title and the theme, I had to join you today. And I want to thank Christian for the detailed and very informative lecture. So I wrote a few paragraphs yesterday, and I'll read them to you, if I may. So this is what I wrote. I wrote, how can I contribute to a discussion on Gandhi and anti-Semitism? First, I will say a few words on two letters sent to Gandhi by two Israeli philosophers, Martin Buber and Yehuda Leib Magnus, in February 1939. Christian mentioned Buber, of course, but he did not mention Yehuda Leib Magnus. And these letters were sent in response to an article by Gandhi, which appeared on the pages of the Harijan, the article that Christian was about to read from when Ananta entered and translated. So I will say something about the article in the Harijan, where Gandhi offers his views on the Jews in Europe under the Nazi regime and on their dream for a national home in Israel. In a sense, Christian touched on this theme through other quotes from Gandhi. And second, I will say a few words on the answer given to Buber, to Martin Buber, not by Gandhi, who never answered the letters. Shimon Lev, author of Soulmates, the story of Mahatma Gandhi, and Herman Kallenbach from 2012, tells me that the letter must have reached Sabramati Ashram, but for some reason were not read by Gandhi, who, when asked about them by Louis Fisher, Magnus's friend, could not remember these letters at all. An answer then, not by Gandhi, but by Ramchandra Gandhi, the Mahatma's son and one of the most creative voices of Indian philosophy in the second half of the 20th century. Ramu Bhai, as he was addressed by his friends, passed away in 2007, and this is a wonderful opportunity to invite all of you to read him. I will draw on his book, I Am Thou, from 1984. Even the title hints at Buber, I Am Thou, 1984. So let me start with the letters. In his article in the Harijan on 30th November 1938, 1938, bad timing I'm writing on Gandhi's behalf, owing to the proximity to the Kristallnacht, the Crystal Night, a pogrom against the Jews all over Germany, which took place on the night of 9th November. It is called the Kristallnacht because of the broken glass of the windows of Jewish-owned stores, houses, and synagogues. I do not know if Gandhi was aware of this violent event. Hundreds were killed, but Buber and Magnus certainly were. Gandhi opens his article stating that his Jewish friends, and Christian spoke about the Jewish friends, have been asking him to comment on the status of the Jews in Germany under the Nazi regime and on their aspiration for a national home in Palestine, Israel for quite some time, which he's finally doing now in this article. My sympathies, I'm quoting Gandhi, are all with the Jews. I have known them intimately in South Africa. Some of them became lifelong companions. Through these friends, I came to learn much of their age-long persecution. They have been the untouchables of Christianity, as Christian mentioned. The parallel between their treatment by Christians and the treatment of the untouchables by Hindus is very close. Religious sanction has been invoked in both cases for the justification of the inhuman treatment meted out to them. Apart from the friendships, therefore, there is more common universal reason for my sympathy with the Jews. The untouchables of Christianity, I'm asking. Gandhi aims to translate, to quote unquote translate, the situation of the Jews in Germany into Indian terms that his readers and him are more familiar with. But he forgets that historically, Christianity originated from Judaism. Moreover, anti-Semitism is not, as against the exploitative caste system in India, a matter of social justice. Gandhi continues to write, but my sympathy does not blind me to the requirements of justice. The cry for the national home for the Jews does not make much appeal to me. Why should they not, like other peoples of the earth, make that country their home where they are born and where they earn their livelihood? Again, this paragraph is not unproblematic, I'm writing. Does not history have any weight? The dream, why cry? To return to Israel. I'm writing, the dream, why cry? To return to Israel is based on the fact that the Jews were exiled from Israel by the Romans in the 1st century CE. And regarding the adoption of one's country of birth as one's homeland, this is a complex issue, especially today in a world of immigration, relocation, dislocation, displacement, a world of migrants, refugees, exiles, escapees, and homeless. Gandhi continues, Palestine belongs to the Arabs in the same sense that England belongs to the English, or France to the French. And on the persecution of the Jews in Europe under the Nazi regime, Gandhi writes, if there ever could be a justifiable war in the name of and for humanity, a war against Germany to prevent the wanton persecution of a whole race could be completely justified. But I do not believe in any war. In any war. A discussion of the pros and cons of such a war is therefore outside my horizon or province. The question about a justified war, Dharma Yuddha, is an interesting one. Is there such a thing, or is it a misnomer? Is the Mahabharata war taking place on the Dharma Kshetra, the soil of Dharma, justified? Gandhi, in his discourses on the Gita delivered at Sabarmati Ashram during 1926 and 1927, reads the Gita, despite the fact that Krishna persuades Arjuna to fight as a manifesto of non-violence. To justify this reading, he suggests that the last 19 verses of chapter 2 of the Gita are the crux of the matter and should be foregrounded over the rest of the Gita text. To the Jews of Europe, Gandhi recommends in his Harijan article to adopt his satyagraha approach in the form of nonviolent resistance that proved efficient, he says, in South Africa. These words, Buber comments, now I'm moving to Martin Buber, namely Gandhi's words in his article, quote, are inspired by most praiseworthy general principles, but the listener is aware that the speaker, namely Gandhi, has cast not a single glance at the situation which he is addressing, unquote. Buber is furious at Gandhi's article and refers to its content as tragicomic. Are you aware, he asks Gandhi in his letter, of the burning of synagogues and scrolls of the law? Do you know or do you not know, Mahatma, what a concentration camp is like and what goes on there? Do you know on the torments in the concentration camp, of its methods of slow and quick slaughter? I cannot assume that you know of this. You have to understand, I'm telling you, that Buber and Magnus, Israeli thinkers living in Jerusalem, admired the Mahatma and were therefore disappointed by his remarks. In their letters, they show acquaintance with Gandhian terminology and use freely terms like ahimsa and satyagraha. I'm interested in their letters owing to their philosophical dimension. Both Buber and Magnus challenge the universality of ahimsa, which Gandhi advocates. Again, I'm reading this sentence. Both Buber and Magnus challenge the universality of ahimsa, which Gandhi advocates. Buber agrees with Gandhi that non-violence is indeed preferable in most cases, but suggests that there are extreme cases in which it is hardly effective. Such a case, he suggests, is the Nazi regime. Buber, in fact, implies, and Krishna of the Gita, in my reading, would agree, that there are cases in which a quantum of adharma is needed to protect and restore the dharma. Yehuda Leib Magnus challenges the universality of ahimsa on different grounds. According to him, in order to make use of ahimsa as an effective weapon, as Gandhi did, one needs to be indifferent to death, as Gandhi, in Magnus's eyes, was. Gandhi treated plague patients when there was no cure for this fatal disease, and his numerous fasts to death further illustrate this indifference. But the Jews, Magnus writes in his letter to Gandhi, I'm quoting, are a people who exalt life, and they can hardly be said to disdain death. For this reason, I have often wondered if we are fit, if we, the Jews, are fit subjects for satyagraha. This is an interesting argument. Satyagraha rooted in ahimsa, has indifference to death as its precondition. Magnus, a Jewish rabbi, further quotes the famous Mishnaic phrase, Kol hametzil nefesh achat, ki'ilu itzil olam umlo'o. Whoever saves a single soul saves the whole world, as to emphasize the value of life for the Jews, implying, and I think that at this point he misunderstood Gandhi, that indifference to death or willingness to die, such as Gandhi's, undermines the value of life. It is exactly the contrary, Ramchandra Gandhi argues. It is life in the face of death, which injects life into life. My time is short, but I wish to touch briefly on Ramchandra Gandhi, on Ramu Bhai's reply to Buber in the chapter Is Ahimsa Non-Violence of his book, I Am Thou. Here, Ramu Bhai suggests that the practitioner of ahimsa strives for non-violence or non-injury as an approach not merely toward the other, but even toward oneself. but even toward oneself, or toward his own soul, as he puts it. This soul, he continues to suggest, strives for, quote, God or freedom. The equation of God and freedom is interesting. For the Mahatma, as you all know, the equation is between God and truth. Any conduct, quote, of unjustified violence or unjustified non-violence, he further suggests, distances my soul from this yearned for freedom. According to Ramubhai, then, we can think not merely of unjustified violence, but also of unjustified non-violence. He explains what unjustified non-violence, this is my last page, what unjustified non-violence is through the Gita. According to him, quote, the violent Mahabharata war is also ahimsa, because to let the Kauravas, Nazis of antiquity, get away with their plans of earth domination would be to injure not only those who would be subjugated or killed by them, it would also amount to injury to the Kauravas themselves, unquote. This is an astonishing statement by Ramubhai. First, the phrase Nazis of antiquity implies that he has read Buber's letter to the Mahatma and agrees with Buber that nonviolence is not the right approach toward the Nazis, as it falls under the category of unjustified nonviolence. On the other hand, action against the Nazis involving a measure of violence falls under the category of ahimsa. Not to act against them, he asserts, would be harmful or injurious, both to those who suffer under their brutal rule, but even to them, since they too are the victims of their own brutality, which takes them away from what we refer to as God or freedom. Ramubhai, in my reading, justifies the employment of a measure of violence against the violent Nazis for the sake of oppressed and oppressor alike. He explains his position suggesting that, quote, ahimsa is like the Divine Mother, with both a benign and a terrifying face, Lakshmi and Kali, unquote. It means that there is something protective about ahimsa as attitude and way of living, whatever justified action it gives rise to, violent, Kali, or benevolent, Lakshmi. But who will decide what is justified? In the Gita, Krishna is portrayed as the ultimate deciding authority. But who can decide what is justified here and now, today, in Europe, in India, in the Middle East, everywhere? Ramubhai assumes that deep down, each of us knows the answer, presuming that a clear-cut borderline distinguishes between dharma and adharma, good and bad. Take, for instance, Duryodhana in the Mahabharata, a second generation of blindness, not sight-wise like his father, but heart-wise, who honestly confesses, I know what dharma is, but I have no inclination for it. I know what adharma is, but I cannot resist it. This popular verse from the Stotra Pandava Gita, quoted in the Madhava Vidya Aranya's 14th century work, Panchadashi, suggests that the villain knows what the good is, even if he refuses to follow it. But my fear is that the idea of the good from Plato and Vyasa, the author of the Mahabharata, onwards, is not as clear as implied by Ramubhai. Moreover, the good is not given and waiting to be revealed or retrieved. It is more of a social contract to be negotiated and earnestly maintained. But in the world of today, is there anyone really interested in creating and maintaining the good? Not as an abstract utopic idea, but as a concrete commitment and responsibility?
Thank you so much, Toda Roba, dear Daniel. So deep, so touching. We are grateful to you. So again, a quick translation. Amaro bhai boni mane Daniel Raveh, Professor Daniel Raveh, से इस्राएल तेलाभिव यूनिवर्सिटी रे दर्शन पढ़ाती एवं से आमर भारत वर्ष रे अनेक समय चिंता एवं पदरे यात्रा करछंती से जयपुर रे रहंती अनेक समय आउ जयपुर रे जो अनेक गभीर दार्शनिक प्रोफेसर दयाकृष्ण सहित से अध्ययन करछंती आ से कहिले तांकर वक्तव्य रे तांकर उपस्थापन रे से कहिले जे गांधी जो कथा कहिथिले जे यूदी माने हिटलर जते बेले तांको आनी कि नै जाउची एते सब हत्या सब करूची तथापि नॉन वायलेंट रेजिस्टेंस अहिंस माने अहिंस प्रतिवाद के हौ एही संपर्क रे मार्टिन बुबर से समय रो जो गभीर दार्शनिक जते बेले हरिजन रे से कथा की पढ़िले से कहले जे हे गांधी महात्मा तुमे कौन जानी पारुछ जो विषय कहूच तुमे कौन केबे कंसंट्रेशन कैंप जो गैस चेंबर रे मन मारी दे जाउछ बिसेंटी जानिछ कि आउ जने दार्शनिक मैग्नस से भी से कथा कहले आ एई विषय से कहले एवं से मध्य कहले डांडियल जे गांधी जो नाती रामचंद्र गांधी तांकर बहिटी अछि एवं एई बहिटा होछि आई एम दाओ मार्टिन बुबर लिखिथिले आई एंड दाओ मु एवं तुमे आई एम दाओ मु ही तुमे सेत्रे नॉन वायलेंस एवं अहिंसा पर से कहउछि जे अहिंसा का गुटे बृहत्तर जिंस आउ केवल जे कोउठी वायलेंस काम करिवो नहे कोउठी नॉन वायलेंस भी काम करिवो सेटा विश्वास करिवो आउ अहिंसा रे दरकार हेले वायलेंस मध्य सेठी काम करिथा एमति अनेक गभीर कथा हमर बंधु डानियल आमके कहिले सो नाउ वी have our conversations please thank you Daniel so dear friends please let us join in thinking together about it those who would like to express your thoughts please indicate in the chat box. And in the meantime, let me invite Gyan-Luigi, please. Gyan-Luigi.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I hope I am audible. I am not sure. I am audible. Am I audible?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Because
we can listen to you, but we cannot listen to your songs.
No, this is better. So, here. Oh, thank you very much. Well, I think that there is a point which, I think that it is very interesting in general, the parallel, the comparison between the anti-Hebrew legislation and the legislation on the untouchables. This is the first point which I would like to underline because I think it would serve perhaps a study or I would like to analyze it. And in this sense, I must say the anti-Hebrew, anti-Jew legislation, which was, for instance, in Italy too, I must admit, from 1938, the anti-Hebrew laws were announced in September 1938, and they had vigor of legislation in November 1938, from 1938 up to the end of the fascist regime, and the legislation which in that period were at validity in a good part of Europe, they were in a certain sense not something new because they based on former legislations which were the norm, unfortunately, I must say, in Europe before the emancipation of the Hebrew population, after the Enlightenment and after Napoleon. That is, in a certain sense, the legislation of the 30s and 40s here during World War II, they were a coming back to a terrible heritage, which was common norm in Europe, in many countries of Europe, perhaps in all countries of Europe, the anti-Hebrew legislation. That is,